Hey, what's up, guys? This is Brian at Whisper Status 74. Sony is at it again. Another huge price drop, shaking up the industry at 75 inches, especially to $2,000, which is extraordinary for display of this caliber from a company like Sony. We have done many videos on the 950G when it first launched. We've done a lot of them recently with the 900F versus the 950G, and kind of illustrating the price difference and the value, whether one was worth it versus the other, because they're very close displays. Then we compared the 950G compared to the high price of the Z9F, thus illustrating the value of the 950G. The Z9F then drops in price drastically, and then it flips it the other way, where you're showing the value of the Z9F versus the 950G as they're very close. The Z9F is still a Master Series display with all that implies. Then now you have this happening again. So 950G down in price. Quick note on the Z9F. I would still get the Z9F. I think the Z9F is also, it's a Master Series display. It does have the same processor, but the first generation processor, so it's not exactly the same. It's still a little bit older. It's still an amazing display. Speaking to owners, since I did that last video on Instagram, on YouTube, how much they're happy with it. Some of them had the Z9D, talking with Robert at Value Electronics, who loved the Z9F and watched it for days and saw that it was still a very good display, still warranting the Master Series moniker, title I should say. The Z9F is still an awesome choice, but now here we are with the X950G. The only real offering at this level from Sony this year, other than the Z9G, which is just on another planet in terms of its performance, but also its price. So 950G, if you want to go above the 800 series where local dimming is, full array, it's the only game in town for Sony, and it is down. Keep in mind, guys, in 2016, the Vizio P series was $4,000 at 75 inches, and that was considered a value. The 940D was $4,000. The 940E was $4,000. So though 75 inches seems obtainable for many of you, the price of this, just keep in mind, only a couple years ago, you had 55-inch TVs that cost this. You still have 55-inch TVs that cost this. But for Sony to be at this price point, at this size, is unreal. It's big news. It's unbelievable. I want to compare it today using ratings.com, which please consider becoming an insider for them. A lot of hard work. And all this is for us to use the numbers, guys. I know numbers doesn't mean everything, but it's a good direct comparison to each other, just numbers-wise. They're a great website. They do very, very hard work. Think about becoming an insider and use this tools feature yourself to compare these displays. Last episode of this, we compared the 950G to the Z9F, the Q90, the Q9FM. The one we didn't compare it to that we should compare it to is its direct competitor, which is the Samsung Q80R. Viewed by many as the best all-around display this year for LED, considering its performance, its gamer-centric features, its vibrancy, and its being a step down from the Q90 in zone count and a few other categories. It still offers very similar picture quality and considered kind of the best all-around performer for everything. We're going to see how the 950G stacks up. I have glanced at this. We'll go through it together. But illustrating price, whenever we talk about these comparisons, guys, they can be night and day. They can be very close. But what it comes down to is, where is the price and where is that value? That's where the performance takes a second step away, and the price to performance ratio is most important. Is a few $1,000s worth HDR or things of that nature? Or is it worth HDMI 2.1? Very, very important to some of us, not important to others. So let's go through this together. What I want to talk about quickly before we go into the actual reviews, we'll read a little bit of what they say here. Now, they like the Samsung Q80R for best all around this year. I don't know if I agree with that on every aspect of it, but here's their quick, their quick writing about it. Is better than the 950G. Q80R has slightly better black uniformity. For darkroom performance, Q80R can also handle reflections better. Keep in mind, handling reflections better is for the smaller sizes. The 950G has better reflection handling on the larger sizes as well as the wider viewing angles. So they actually say that right here. Both TVs have technology that improves viewing angles for the Q80R on all models, where the 950G only has it at the 75 and up. It may, yeah, 75 and up. So that's important for those of you that are looking at the 55-inch category. Now, in pricing here, this is where we want to talk about before we get into the review of them both. The 55-inch Q8 or the 55-inch 950G is $600. The 55-inch Q80R is $1,400. That's a $600 price difference. That's substantial. At 65 inches, the Q80R is $1,400 versus $1,700 for the Q80R. That's $300 price difference. So you see it changing with the different sizes, which is interesting to have it at 55 be such a large disparity. At 75 inches, this is the big one. The 75-inch 950G is $2,000. The Q80R is $3,000. That is a $1,000 price difference. And what I find most interesting is the 85-inch 950G versus the Samsung Q80R at 82 inches. They're the same price. But keep in mind that the Q80R is 82 inches versus 85 inches. But I find it interesting that the sizes don't exactly correspond. So you might be excited about the 75-inch price drop, run over to grab, a 55-inch or a 65 and see the price gulf isn't quite the same. But that 55 price difference is actually pretty substantial at $600, less so at 65, and we will go in and break it down now. But keep in mind the price differences, especially the 80 to the 85 being the same price, is pretty amazing. That they're the same price. You have the Samsung Q80R on the left, the 950G on the right. Build quality, they look very different. I don't love either in terms of the stand. I'm not a big fan of this wide stand. I much more prefer the single stand that you see on either the Q90 or on the older Sonys. I don't love this wide angle stand. I don't love myself the Q80, just simple. I mean, considering I had the QS 9000 and those displays were elegant, I don't love their very simple look to it, kind of robotic feet that they have there. But not a huge big deal, especially if you're hanging it. Main differences, no main differences. These numbers are pretty accurate. Again, the Q80 is on the left, the 950G is on the right. Mixed usage. The Q80R is going to score higher in some of these numbers. The big difference you're going to see is here in video games, but this is primarily due to variable refresh rate and their gamer-centric features. But the Sony has always been good for gaming, not just for input lag, but their motion is stellar. But again, very comparable. What you love to see is all green on both sides. I don't know if I agree with that being a better design, but it is important to some of you. Again, comparing this to the the KS 9000, the very elegant look, I just don't love these on either actually, but I definitely don't like the Samsungs. But I actually don't either. I don't care much either. They're both pretty, thick in terms of, a few inches thick from the side. You're going to see that with full array. The borders are very close. Heat distribution, don't really care about that. Now, surprisingly, contrast ratio, Samsung also got hit for this, considering how high the contrast ratio was on the Q9FN and the Q8FN. The contrast ratio is not super high for either of these displays. It is higher for the Samsung. Again, do these numbers mean much compared to what our eye can see? That is debatable. To me, these are still very important numbers. The local dimming, without local dimming, they're actually lower. Not by a ton, but they are lower. Local dimming has a higher for Samsung versus the Sony. But that's not a huge difference. I mean, it is a difference, but not huge. But neither have a super high local dimming compared to some of their competitors. both full array. Their brightness is also very interesting. Sony is actually brighter in a lot of these numbers. They kind of flip-flop here and there, but they're within line, and you also have, I'm sure, panel-to-panel variants. And I should have checked to see which sizes they reviewed here, but typically for them it's the 65-inch. I think these numbers jump up with 75. I do believe that the 75-inch version of both displays is probably better, but it's probably negligible in some ways. So very comparable in brightness. They gave them the same score, most likely because these numbers flip-flop. Keep in mind, though, Sony does typically have a better sustained brightness. It doesn't dissipate over time. Not using ABL, but it does dissipate. That doesn't typically matter for films, matters a little bit more for gaming. And HDR peak performance brightness, what's interesting is the real scene. Let me go back up here really quickly. Real scene brightness is not something a lot of us talk about or discuss. You go 2%, 10%. Real scene is what it sounds like. You know, the real scene brightness, the maximum luminosity the TV can obtain. So that's where some displays have a huge peak brightness, but actually don't have a high real scene brightness. The Sony is a little bit brighter, again, by, 15, 20. And then the real scene brightness, surprisingly, on the 950G is a good deal brighter than the Samsung. The Samsung, to me, is always going to appear more vibrant due to its wider color gamut and the way that Sony has their color, which some of you love, some of you don't love. Why that's important is Sony's look being more accurate. Is that something you like? You know, a lot of these other reviewers really love accuracy. I like accurate, but I really do like vibrancy as well. So I'm not as stuck on that as a lot of people are. So keep in mind the Samsung has a very different look than the Sony. They actually look very, very, very different. But you might like the way that saturation is on the Samsung. You might not like it. Gray uniformity, the same. Oh, keep in mind, let's go back to HDR quickly. Having HDR10 Plus might be important to many of you versus Dolby Vision. They say it's not a format war. It is, to me. Dolby Vision, I think, is an excellent addition, but so is HDR10 Plus. And a lot of people have been liking HDR10 Plus, especially AVS forums, really puts that in as a minus for many of the displays such as the C9, that they are disliking it not having HDR10 Plus. So its level of performance, or I should say its level of importance, is really up to the individual. I think both are a nice addition to have. If you're somebody who has a Panasonic, you will get them all, which is amazing if you can get it. But that's up to you guys. I don't look at it as a huge hit on Samsung. A lot of you guys would never buy a Samsung because it lacks Dolby Vision. I don't believe Sony's implementation of HDR or Dolby Vision to be the very best. It's better than it was. I don't think it's the very, very best, so that wouldn't sway my decision all that much. But for many of you, it's make or break. Brightnesses, again, they are close. The Sony being brighter in some of the categories, primarily in real scene brightness. To me, that HDR is a pretty big jump, though the Samsung may appear, again, more vibrant due to better local dimming, a little bit of a higher contrast ratio, and their vibrancy and just the way their picture looks. Gray uniformity is pretty much the same. Black uniformity. Now, the zone counts are comparable from what I understand. It's hard to get solid numbers of zone counts considering some reviewers review only the 55. Neither one has the highest zone count. Would say that the black uniformity on the Samsung is better in terms of eliminating blooming, where the 950G will have a bit more blooming. It does have a low zone count. They both have, again, comparable, but Samsung does handle it differently. You'll hear that from many reviewers. The knock on the 950G would be that there will be more blooming. That has been exaggerated, or again, that's a panel by panel basis. There is going to be some blooming. With the Samsung, you will have less blooming, except their local dimming tends to lose shadow detail. So you can have less blooming with the Samsung, but lose some details and you can have a little bit more blooming on the 950G, which I'm sorry, all LEDs do have blooming of some kind, every single one of them that's out there. It just all depends on your panel, but you're going to see blooming in LEDs, especially now that they've all gotten a little more, they've all dropped their zone count this last year, all of them, except for maybe Vizio. TCL and Hisense still have high zone counts, but especially Vizio. But these other companies have changed it. I have thoughts on why. I think that we'll have to talk about that separately, but I think you're going to have a high failure rate. I think these zones, these high zone things are not worth the money for these manufacturers. So regardless of that, you might have slightly more blooming on the 950G, but you will lose some shadow detail here. On the Samsung, that is, again, what's more important to you. Quickly, important to me, I do like a better black level. I don't love blooming. The 950G is, again, you will have a little bit of blooming, but I would probably lose a little bit of shadow detail myself. I'm also like OLEDs being that black. I do know I'll lose some detail there as well. That trade-off to me is worth it. It might not be to you, but that's why we're going through this. The reflections, again, we're not going to spend time on that simply because you're looking at the higher sizes of the 950G having, better performance that way. This is what Samsung is known for, is being notoriously hard to calibrate for these guys. And, pre-calibration, Sony is already very, very accurate. And they were able to get it close or get it to the same number. Which I know Vincent and HTV Test has had a hard time calibrating them. 20 point versus 10 point. Upscaling, both companies are known to have excellent processing. Again, Sony's got a little bit better reputation in terms of its processing of upscaling, of lower, but same numbers here. Now this is where you have Samsung's edge as far as I'm concerned. Is the wider color gamut, the wider coverage, but some of you guys don't like the saturation of that image being too saturated, too colorful, but I think you can knock that down. You can make the Sony look more vibrant with live color and some of their features. You can make the Samsung look more natural. To me, they do have different looks, but you can get the Samsung looking as natural and you can get the Sony looking as vibrant. That's just a part of the settings. Color volume, again, the Samsung is higher. This could be a panel by panel basis, but Sony, again, due to that processing, there is less screen gradients. The gradients is better, I should say. And, that's still a decent score, but that, again, could be panel by panel. No image retention. So, motion. There has been some talk that the motion of the 950G is not as good as the 900F. I can't really verify that. I will tell you that Sony has excellent motion. Samsung has obviously better motion in this category. The response time, though, this is what's interesting. The motion better for Samsung. For overall motion, pixel response, Sony's better. So this is what, the 900 series have always had very good pixel response. Think about it in gaming and moving quickly. That is a big number. The response time on the Samsung, excellent as well, but having variable refresh rate is definitely something that helps. So to me, the motion is very good on both. A bit better on the Samsung in that category. Response time a little bit better. To me, that is a wash. Again, response time, 80%, 4.3. Again, a wash. Black frame insertion, not something that I use, but they do like it for the Samsung versus using clear. I never use that stuff, but if that's important to you, you can look deeper into that. Both got great numbers for his motion per interpolation. Frame times, things of that nature. Let's get into some of these numbers here. variable refresh rate. Now this is where the Sony completely bows out, has nothing to do with it. Native refresh rate, 120 hertz. They both are FreeSync and HDMI. I would love to see them get G-Sync. I would just love to see that happily. Hopefully it does happen, but it's not at this point. FreeSync is there. You can, I think, rig G-Sync to work for you computer fans out there, but you know, this is just not a comparison. They do have these gamer-centric features that Sony just does not have. Input lag is also excellent on both displays. 4K at 60, you know, better on the Samsung. Numbers are better on the Samsung overall. And again, if it's important to you guys, the 1440p at 120 hertz, I think Sony just dropped that. Just didn't find it to be important, but this input lag is sick. 6.2, 6.3, you're getting into monitor land there. And 4K 60 with interpolation, that I like. You add motion interpolation, you still have a very low input lag. Was not aware of that. That is huge for you guys that like to get out of, to add motion to your settings. And even outside of game mode, you know, that's high. That's not bad considering you'd be using that for single player campaigns. Here are your native resolutions. 1440p at 120 hertz, really the only difference. I do like that the 1440p at 60 hertz is native versus forced. Could be something that you guys care about. Not a big deal for me personally. This might be important to many of you guys with ARC, audio pass-through. The HDMIs are virtually identical, but you have here as far as Dolby Atmos via True EARC. The Samsung does not have it, as well as DTSX doesn't have it. Sony does have that. So a lot of you guys with sound bars and using it without a receiver, that's important to you. That's something a lot of you guys ask about. So in closing, I do like the Q80R a great deal. I think it's an excellent LED, but that's the comparison to the 950G, which now is just in another level considering how cheap it is now. I mean, really, I know this video is very, very long, and that's the comparison. The 950G is just a better value. I do like some of the settings and the things that are on the Samsung. To you guys, though, is it worth that price difference? I'm going to say probably not. The Sony is just a better value now. Samsungs are always a little bit more expensive. But let me know what you think in the comments, guys, with these two versus each other. The 950G is just a better value. I'm not going to say it's a better display, but it's definitely a better value and one you guys should keep an eye on. The Q80R may drop. Also, if you've purchased these displays, you can get the price difference back if your return window is still open. If that's important to you, it should be important to you. Go get your money back if you have the return window open. They will typically honor the price difference. Even Amazon will do that for you. I hope everyone is doing well. Sorry for the long video. Q80R versus the 950G. Supportratings.com. The 950G is just an amazing value, guys. Let me know in the comments if you have either one of these displays. Let me know what you think. I will talk to you guys soon. Take care.